All right, Yevamos, good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan. Baruch Meir and Rina Dubin for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drashos this month. In the Schus B'Refuah Shlema for their niece, Chavet Tzipora, Bas Chaya Malka. To thank Shmuley and Liba Dinovitz for dedicating the Shiurim and Drashos this month. The Schus of an Aliyah for the Neshama of Shmuley's father, Harav Peres Avram, Ben Harav Binyamin Moshe. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Adam and Leslie Rosen for Refuah Shlema for Esther Bas Sarah. Our Day of Learning sponsors, Alan and Sherry Steinmetz, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Alan's mother, Chaya Bas Reb Meir Zichron Livracha, and Stella Kovacs in loving memory of her father, Eliezer ben Shalom Zichrona Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamas will have an Aliyah, the families in Nechama, and all of those who require a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. Today's daf is Kuf Aleph 101. We have a lot to do today, really some great Gemara. We are picking up on Kuf Amud Beis 100b, and we are picking up Ve'ela Begrusha 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, very quickly, we learned in yesterday's daf, the Gemara started with the interesting case of Shmuel, where you had a group of 10 Kohanim. One of them separated from the group and impregnated a woman. They have a child. So Shmuel said the halacha is that child is a shtuki. Says the Gemara, child is a shtuki. We know with absolute certainty that what? We don't know who the father is, but one thing we do know, which is the father is a Kohen. As such, why is the kid a shtuki? So Shmuel introduced to us this idea of the concept v'haisalo ulazaro acharov. That when it comes to kahuna, it's not simply enough to go ahead and know in a general sense that the father was a Kohen, but rather one must know exactly who their father is. So the Gemara challenged that idea, and the Gemara wanted to suggest that the only time this is true is in a case of znus. But in a case of nisuin, in a case of actual marriage, even if there's some level of paternal ambiguity, as long as we know for sure that whoever the father is, he's a Kohen, that would be good enough. So the Gemara is continuing, so the Gemara is trying to challenge this from the Mishnah. Ve'ela begrusha, so the Gemara is ve'ela begrusha. It must be that the case of the Mishnah that spoke about the two fathers who are Kohanim, it must be that is talking about a case of grusha. Umay achar baila. So what does it mean ultimately, again, when we say after her husband, referring to the first husband, achar get baila, it's referring to the fact that the first husband divorced her. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, emo seifa, hu ein metamin lahem, vehem ein metamin lo. So Rabbi say, here's the problem. So remember again, the Gemara is talking about over here, in this situation, the last iteration of the Mishnah, hayu shnehem kohanim. They were both Kohanim. So remember again, now the Gemara is trying to understand, okay, you're talking to me now about a case where she was divorced from husband number one. So let's analyze how this exactly works. Remember, what did the Sefer at the end of the Mishnah say? Hu ein metame lahem, vehem eina metamin lo. So the Mishnah said, the son, remember again, I will say we don't know the son, this is yesterday's Mishnah, is the son a 9-month baby from husband number one? Is he a 7th-month baby from his husband number two? So now we're going with the case where they are both Kohanim. So the Mishnah says, he, the son, cannot become tamei to either of the husbands, right? Vehem eina metamin lo. They can't become tamei to him. So what's the case? Bishlama hein ein metamin lo l'chumra. So I understand why neither of the fathers can be tamei for the son, because they may not be a son, right? So in other words, they're both Kohanim, and they can't become tamei for this boy, for this son, because no one knows who the father is. Elohu ein metame lohem amai. But why can't he become tamei for them? Rabbi say, watch this. After all, bishlam l'sheni lo litmile. So I understand why he can't become tamei for the second father, for the second husband, El Rishon Litmile, but he should be able to become tamei for the first husband for the simple reason, Memanav Shach, Ibrehu, Shapir Kamatamile. So ultimately, again, if he is the son of the first father, of the first husband, he should be able to become tamei. V'i Barbasrahu, Shapir Kamatamile. And by the way, if he's the son of the second husband, he also should be able to become tamei for the first husband. Why? T'chalalhu. Because Rabbi said, listen to this. If it's a case of grusha, that means second husband who's a Kohen married a Grusha. If second husband who's a Kohen married a Grusha, then what's the status of the child? A Chalal. A Chalal doesn't have an Isser Tumah. So therefore, again, it can't be talking about a case of Grusha. Elalav biznus. Rather, it must be talking about a case of znus. Umay achar baila. So what does it mean ultimately again, achar baila? Achar boala. It means after the man with whom she committed znus. V'katani seifa, ola b'mishmar shel zeh, v'shel zeh. So therefore the Mishnah must be talking about a case ultimately of znus. And therefore again, despite the fact that it's a case of znus, what does it say? If both husbands, if both men were Kohanim and were from the same mishmar, then what's the halacha? This boy has the ability to go ahead and join the mishmar. So what do you see from here? Tiyuf to the Shmuel. So Rabbi say, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, even if you don't know who the child's father is, but you know with absolute certainty that what? That the child's father is a Kohen. A child has the ability to operate as a Kohen. So we reject the drasha of Zar'o Acharov. We reject that drasha. So I will say, this is incredibly important. So right now, what we've been operating with is we had a drasha of Shmuel. Shmuel says Zar'o Acharov means what? In order to be a Kohen, it is not enough to know that your father is a Kohen. What do you have to know? What do you have to know? Specifically who your father is. The Gemara feels it has just disproved that notion that all you need to be a Kohen is to know your father is a Kohen, even if you don't know exactly who your father is. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right there. Amar Shmaya, Mima Enes. Shmaya says maybe not. Maybe the case is talking about a case of Mima Enes. But also remember again, what's the case of Miyun? The case of Miyun is a situation where halacha l'maisa, a girl was married off by her mother or her brother. By her mother or her brother, right? And therefore, halacha l'maisa, again, that is a kiddushay d'Rabbanan, and because it's kiddushin d'Rabbanan, before she goes ahead and she becomes an adult, she has the ability to refuse the marriage, and simple refusal results in dissolution of the marriage. So says the Gemara, so mima enes mikayalda. So we'll say, so maybe not. In other words, the Gemara is just trying to suggest maybe the Mishnah is not a case of znus. The Mishnah is a real case of marriage. So, but I understand, with the Mima Enes, she couldn't have children. The Gemara says, there are 3 women who are permitted to use a moch. I will say a moch literally is a form of birth control, right? Again, it was a wad of material that was there to soak up the zera. So 3 women have the right to use birth control. Who are they? Kitana, Me'uberes, Umeinika. So a kitana, a minor, Me'uberes, a woman who is already pregnant, and a menika, a woman who is nursing. So kitana, what are we worried about with the kitana? Shemetis aber v'tamos. We're worried about a kitana, that if a kitana becomes pregnant, she could die. Me'uberes, a woman who's already pregnant, shematasa ubra sandal. I will say again, it's interesting that the Gemara had this concern, reflecting their medical knowledge, that a pregnant woman could become pregnant again, and ultimately again cause harm to the fetus. Cause harm to the fetus. So the Gemara to the previous fetus, to the first fetus, right? Menika shematig moles ben Yevamos. A nursing mother, lest she go ahead and become pregnant, and again, if she becomes pregnant, that could diminish her milk supply, putting her child in peril. Ve'ezi kitana. What's a kitana? Mibas achat asrei shana v'yom echad ad bas shtem esrei shana v'yom echad. What's a kitana? Kitana is from 11 years old in one day, ultimately again to 12 years old in one day. So the Gemara says, Pachos mikan, younger than this, or yeser mikan, or older than this. Mishameshes kidarka v'holechas Rabbi Meir. Meir says, younger than this age, she can't become pregnant at all. All right, older than this age, her body could withstand pregnancy. Therefore, she doesn't have the rishus to go ahead and use birth control. V'cham say, achazu v'achazu mishameshes kidarka v'holechas. Shabbos is an interesting position. Chacham say, any of these women, birth control is aser. One is not permitted to use birth control. And ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have compassion upon these women. Shene'emar shomer pesayim Hashem. I will say the pasuk of shomer pesayim Hashem means Hashem watches over the simple people, which the Gemara often quotes as the concept to engage. So I will say there are certain activities of daily life that by definition have a level of danger associated with them. But yet we don't refrain from engaging in them because we assume that because they are activities of daily living and Kadosh Baruch Hu watches over us. So I'll say, just as an extreme example, how was one permitted to drive? After all, again, getting in a car, right? Getting in a car has an inherent level of danger associated with it. And we are told, Unishmarte ma'od nafshosechem, that one is supposed to watch over their life. So how could you drive? There's a concept of Shomer Pesayim Hashem, which is why I will say, I'll just point out, certain things that have an elevated level of danger, one is not supposed to do. Like, I don't know that it's pashut that one is supposed to go skydiving, right? That, in other words, that to go ahead and just jump out of an airplane for the sake, I don't know what the risk is, but I would assume there must be some level of risk, right? So if you think it's very important in general, one is not permitted halachically to engage in certain forms of certain activities that carry a heightened risk with them. But certain things that are activities of daily living, although they carry a risk, they fall under the umbrella of Shomer Pesayim Hashem. So the Chachamim say, getting pregnant, having children, of course, is fraught with risk, but it's everyday risk, and therefore, again, we say Shomer Pesayim Hashem. It's a fascinating sugi in general, not for now, but quite fascinating. So the Gemara says, how could this come up? Mishkachas la b'kiddushay tos. You could come up with this in the case of Kiddushay Tos, a case of mistaken Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuel, don't Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuel, Mishra Rabbi Yishmael, Behilon is Pasa. Asura, so we'll say the pasuk over here is talking about a married woman, who has an extramarital affair. So the halacha is, the Torah says, Behilon is Pasa, she was not coerced. She was not coerced. Obviously, if a married woman was coerced, she remains permitted to her husband, leaving aside a case of a Kohen. Behilon it Pasa Asura. Hanispasa mutares. But if a woman chas v'shalom was coerced, then she remains permitted to her husband. But there's another case of a woman who, even though she wasn't coerced, but she had relations with another man, still remains permitted to her husband. And who is that? Ve'ezo zu shekidushei tos. This refers to a woman who engaged in kiddushay tos. So you can have a variety of cases of kiddushay tos. A very simple example. A woman goes, we'll say, paradigmatic example, which actually is the subject of much halachic literature. A woman marries a man, and then she finds out she has a condition. He has a condition, right? Let's say again, Ramosha discusses a case like this. She finds out that he has a terminal illness, that he has a severe mental health issue, and he did not disclose. That could be grounds for kiddushay tos. She could say, had I known that you had this condition, I would not have married you. And actually what that is grounds for, like any other fraudulent transaction, is voidable. No different than if I was buying a car from you, I thought I was buying a Cadillac, and it turns out that you sold me a Yugo. I don't know what they make. Do they make Yugos anymore? I don't think so, right? There was right. Okay. Anyway, right. So you told me. So again, that's mekach tos. That's mekach tos, and I can go ahead and ultimately void the transaction based on that. So the Gemara says, shafilu b'na murkav al kseifa b'ma enes v'alachazal. Because we're saying in that kind of case, even if halacha l'maisa, she's holding her son. In other words, that she's holding the physical proof of the fact that she was married to this man. Nevertheless, halacha l'maisa, the marriage is voidable. Good. So we'll say, so that's how the Gemara explains the case. Let me show you the Rambam, because we'll say the truth is, what's fascinating about this case is, what we're focused on over here is the statement of Shmuel. So remember again, Shmuel, sorry, let me just find the Rambam. Good. So the Rambam, Hilchos Isurei Bia, Perek Chaf, Halacha Chaf. If I can get it quickly, then fine. So I will say, listen to the case. Ketzad. Asara Kohanim Shepirish Echaman Abal Sharia Vlad Kohen. Vaday v'apa piken hol ve'ini odea avu shisiachesyo mishaskin oso midin kahuna. So Rabbi say the Rambam indeed paskins like Shmuel, like Shmuel, namely that halacha l'maisa, in order to be a Kohen, it is not enough to know that your father is a Kohen. Rather, what do you need? What do you need? You need to know who your father is. That is based on the drasha of V'haisalo ulazaro acharov. There must be yichus that is direct from the father. So we'll say very important halacha. However, the Rambam does accept the qualification, which is, when is this true? In a case of znus. In a case of marriage, like the case of our Mishnah, ultimately, again, halacha l'maisa, the boy would have the din of a Kohen. Because Rabbi say, again, over here, once again, we know it's one of the two husbands. One of them is a Kohen, but halacha l'maisa, we're just not sure which one exactly is his father. But because this occurred in a marital context, the boy's yichus will be intact. Obviously, which mishmar he's a part of is going to be subject to some level of dispute. So the Rambam accepts the position of Shmuel halacha l'maisa. Quite fascinating. Top of Kuf Aleph. Hayushtem kohanim. So Tan Rabbanan. So we'll say we learned in the Brisa hi kazeh v'chazer v'hi kazeh kilal zeh v'chazer v'kilal zeh or kilal shnei mevasachos. So we'll listen to this. Now we're going to talk about the fact. So now we have our case in Mishnah where we have a boy who we know is the son of one of these two men. We just don't know what. Which one? Which one? So we've already established that for kahuna purposes, as long as everything is taking place in a marital context, this young man will be a Kohen. Which mishmar he's a part of is a problem. We also saw now we paskin like Shmuel, that if you have parental ambiguity in a case of znus, in that case, he won't be a Kohen. He'll be a shtuki. What about other ramifications of dealing with parents? He gazeh. Let's say, so remember again, we've got two men in question over here, Ruvain and Shimon. Both were married to Rachel. Rachel married Shimon without waiting the requisite 3 months after, let's say, divorcing Ruvain. Well, divorcing is a bad example because kahuna, but being widowed from Ruvain, well, let's do divorcing for now, leaving aside the kahuna. So what happens? They have a kid. The kid is Yehuda. Yehuda comes along, he hits Ruvain, and then he goes in and hits Shimon. He curses Ruvain and then subsequently curses Shimon. So Rabbi says, remember again, you're not allowed to hit your father. You're not allowed to curse your father. What's the penalty for hurting or cursing your father? Right? Misa. So Rabbi say in this case, so Yehuda went ahead and cursed both of these men, hit both of these men. Right? Or what happened? Or Shnei Babas, I'm sorry, Chazva Kila Zev Chazva Kila. Sorry, I lost the place. Hikazeh v'chazav hikazeh, kilo zeh v'chazav v'kilo zeh, kilo shneim b'basachos. Hika shneim b'basachos. Or you hit both of them, right? Yehuda hit both of them at the same time, or cursed both of them at the same time. Chayiv. Ultimately, again, about saying in all of these cases, you're chayiv. Now, take a look at the top Rashi. Chayiv. Shari echad mehem aviv. Because they will say, why are you chayiv? Because you for sure hit your father or cursed your father. Which one? I don't know which one, but one of them is your father. Now Rashi says over kasavar hasra'as safek shma hasra hol imanafshach over. Then I will say in general, in order to be liable for something, you need hasra, you need a warning. Now this first opinion the Chachamim hold that what we call hasra'as safek. Hasra'as safek means non-definitive warning, which means what I was saying. Because remember, think about this for just a moment. Imagine the situation. You've got Reuven and Shimon standing here, and Yehuda is here as well. So Yehuda is the kid, Reuven and Shimon are the two husbands. Yehuda is about to hit both of these men, right? So there are Eidim there. And what do the Eidim say? Yehuda, don't do that. Why don't you do that? Why not? Because one of these men is your father and you will be chayiv. I will say that is a non-definitive hasra. That's called hasra safek. The Chachamim hold hasra safek works. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Bebasachas chayiv, beze'achar zeh pater." Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, holds is if you hit both of them at the same time, or if you curse both of them at the same time, you'll be chayiv. You'll be chayiv. Why, Rabbi say? Because hitting them at the same time, ultimately, again, because that's a hasra'as vadai. It's ambidextrous, right? That's a hasra'as vadai. Because then you're getting definitive hasra. Don't hit Ruvain. Don't hit Shimon because they are your father, right? You could say that. In other words, I could warn for two things simultaneously. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, there would be liability in that case. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, B'zeh achar zeh, pater. But if you were to hit them one after the other, ultimately, again, you'd be pater. Rabbi say, why would you be pater? Because that's what's called hasra'as safek. Hasra'as safek, non-definitive hasra. I v'hatanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer pater. Sorry, v'hatanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer pater b'basachos. But Rabbi, we have in the Brayse that Rabbi Yehuda holds that halacha l'maaseh you're pater even if you hit them both or curse them both at the same time. So trei Tanai with Rabbi Yehuda. There are two Tanai according to Rabbi Yehuda, two different versions of the position of Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, "My time of demand de pater." So we'll say, what is the logic, right? What is the logic of the one who holds that you're pater even b'basachos? So we'll say this would be interesting. So the Brayse introduces us to this idea that even if you hit both men at the same time, or curse both men at the same time, that you would be pater. Now, what's the logic in that, right? Why would you? So I will say, I understand why if you hit them one after the other, curse them one after the other, why you would be pater. That part I understand, because halacha l'maaseh that's hasra'as safek. But why would you be pater ultimately for what? For hitting them or cursing them at the same time? Because at the same time, that's hasra'as vadai. So why would you be pater? To which the Gemara says, Amar Bichanina, Ne'emar bracha lamata v'ne'emar bracha lamalo. So I'll say it says bracha. Now in this case, bracha doesn't mean a blessing. Bracha is a euphemistic term for a curse. It says cursing. It says cursing lamata, which is a reference to cursing your parents, and it says cursing chas v'shalom kod by Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So mala shein shutfus. So just like I will say in the case of cursing above, when it's talking about Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the case of cursing Hashem is cursing Hashem and Hashem alone. There's no one else included in that curse. Af lemata she'in bo shutfus. So too in cursing your parents, one is only biblically liable for cursing their parent when there's no shutfus. In other words, when you're cursing one person. So I will say, so therefore again, just like a cursing Hakadosh Baruch Hu chas v'shalom is just cursing Hashem and Hashem alone, so to the case of where there's biblical liability for cursing one's parent, it's only cursing the parent alone, without anyone else. Furthermore, ve'iskish hakal l'klala, and in general we have a hekish, we compare hitting to cursing. So therefore I will say, just like cursing can only be one parent, therefore again, hitting is only one parent, and therefore this opinion holds that even when you're hitting both fathers at the same time, cursing both fathers at the same time, there'll be no biblical liability for that joint act. Good, fascinating machlokes. So it says the Gemara va'ola b'mishmaro. So Rabbi says, so remember again. So we saw in this last part that if the two fathers, right, Reuven and Shimon, if they're both kohanim, and what? Both from the same mishmar. So the Mishnah said, so what's the halacha? Sa'ola b'mishmaro shalzeh v'shalzeh ve'eno cholek. So va'ola, the son, Yehuda, could go up and be part of the mishmar. Because remember again, we know that halacha l'maaseh is a Kohen, because they're both Kohanim. We know that he's part of the same mishmar. Why? Because both fathers, Reuven and Shimon, are from the same mishmar. To which the Gemara said, but however, here's what's interesting. The Mishnah said, Eino cholek. He does not get a portion from that mishmar. He doesn't get a portion. So says the Gemara, Achar de'eino cholek lama ola. So I'll say, I don't understand. If he does not get a portion, so I'll say, remember again, Mishmar is made up of multiple batei avos, multiple families, right? Each family serves in the mikdash in a different day, a different week. So the Mishmar gets a week, and each Beis Av gets a different day of that week. So the Mishnah says that halacha l'maaseh, when Reuven and Shimon are both Kohanim and part of the same Mishmar, the kid Yehuda goes and serves with that Mishmar. But he does not get a portion. Portion means he doesn't get any sacrificial meat, and he doesn't get to divide up into the hides. Now, why not? Technically speaking, because remember, as we're going to see, each Beis Av could say, you're not part of us, so therefore he doesn't have a right. So the Gemara says, well, if he's not getting meat, and he's not getting hides, lama ola, then what's the point of going up and being part of the Mishmar? So I'll say, this is so beautiful. So the Gemara says, Lama Ola ha'amar ba'ina dine avid mitzvah. What do you mean, why is he going up? Right? Going up is not about getting meat and getting hides. What is going up about? Doing the mitzvah of serving in the Beis HaMikdash. I will say, by the way, I just want to point out, what a profound Gemara. What a profound Gemara. You see, the Havamina is, the only things we do in life are the things that what? We get something tangible out of. What's in it for me? And if there's nothing in it for me, then why would I do it? Kamash malan, that greatness in life comes from doing things even without a tangible result. It's like the Gemara is incredulous about this Havamina. Gemara says, why should he go up? He's not getting anything. Why should he go up? Because serving in the Beis HaMikdash is a mitzvah. Yeah, even if you don't walk away with a brand new leather jacket, right? And even if you don't get some extra steaks, at the end of the day, the ability to serve even without a tangible benefit is an incredible schus. And I will say, again, so often in life we are programmed to think about, we do things, if you could show me what's in it for me, show me what the benefit is. But if there's no tangible take-home benefit, I'm not in. The truth is, that is a fine approach in certain areas in life. Where it doesn't work is in one's ruchnius. Because ruchnius is filled with things that do not necessarily have a tangible, realizable benefit. But ultimately, again, they're still beautiful. It's still meaningful, and it's still purposeful. In our ruchnius, we have to program ourselves to do things because they are good, because they are right, because they are the Ratzon Hashem, even if there is no tangible what's in it for me. So the Gemara says, Ela Allah lo katani, ela ola bal karcho. Rather, I will say, what the Gemara is pointing out over here is, it doesn't say Allah, rather it says Ola. Ola makes it sound like we make Yehuda go up to the Mikdash. Yeah, interestingly enough, we do make Yehuda go up. Why do we make Yehuda go up? Because we'll say if Yehuda doesn't go up, it looks like he's a halal. And if it looks like he's a halal, then ultimately, again, that reflects poorly on these Kohanic families. So it's quite fascinating. So even if Yehuda doesn't want to go up because he says to himself, hey, what's in it for me, right? He says, why should I go up? I get no meat, I get no hides, why should I go? We make him go. We make him go in order to preserve the familial integrity of Reuven and Shimon's families. So we'll say, says so we'll say, so remember again, if Reuven and Shimon are part of two different mishmaros, then we don't make Yehuda go. Why not? The Gemara says, because we'll say if they're part of two different mishmaros, then at the end of the day, we don't make Yehuda go up because he's not going to be able to serve. Why not? Because this mishmar will say, you're not part of us. This mishmar will say, not part of us. So we'll say, but the same thing can happen in one mishmar, because as I just said before, even if he shows up for one mishmar, what could happen? One mishmar is still made up of multiple bate avos, multiple families. So he could show up, and what's going to happen? One Beis Av is going to say, Yehuda, no, you're not part of our family. And ultimately, again, the other one's going to say, Yehuda, you're not part of our family. Im hayu shnehem mishmar echad ubeis av echad notel chelek echad. So I will say, what is interesting to note is as follows. There is a case where Yehuda could go up and not only serve, but ultimately what? Even take a chelek. See, I will say, here's what happens. If Reuven and Shimon are both Kohanim, but they're part of two mishmaros, so does the son go up to the Beis HaMikdash? No, because no one's going to let him serve. If he's part of the same mishmar, can he go up to the Beis HaMikdash? Yes, but what doesn't happen? He doesn't get a chilek. He doesn't get meat or hides. However, interestingly enough, if Reuven and Shimon are part of the same mishmar and part of the same Beis Av, in that case, Yehuda can go up to the Mikdash, can serve, and what? Can take a chilek. He can take a chilek. Why can he take a chilek? Because even though we don't know exactly who his father is, we know that both of his potential fathers are both Kohanim, both part of the same mishmar, and both part of the same Beis Av. I will tell you, there's something profoundly tragic in this Gemara as well, which is you see what human nature is. Human nature is we reject people who are not like us. Right? I will say, you would think to yourself, these are the Kohanim, B'nai Aaron. Right? Aaron, who's Aaron? Oives Habrios, right? Makarvan LaTorah. Oh, Aaron loves everyone. So a guy shows up, we're not sure about his paternity, not which Beis Av. They're going to welcome him. They're going to invite him for a Shabbos meal. It's going to be so beautiful. They're going to have a kumzitz. It's going to be here. Eat this, eat this, eat this. The Gemara says, no, what happens when he shows up in the basement? What happens? What happens? You're not part of us. See, I say, because human nature is that we tend to reject people who are not like us. Sometimes we do it outright. Sometimes we do it in a very nuanced way. And it's true if you're a Kohen, and it's true if you're a Levi, and it's true if you're a Yisrael. I'll say it's important. It's important to know human nature is such that we tend to surround ourselves with people who are just like us and push away people who aren't. Which is, if we know that that's the tendency, and we know that that is the behavioral default, how hard we have to work against that. Hadron Allah, no sinal nusa. We'll say, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. We'll say, very exciting. Now we're going to get into some interesting mechanical halachas of chalitza. Really interesting. Mitzvahs chalitza. I'm telling you, that was a definitive statement. This is very interesting. Says the Mishnah, mitzvahs chalitza b'shlosha dayanin. The mitzvah of chalitza is with 3 dayanin, 3 judges. Va'afilu shloshtan hedyotos. And I will say, even if they're not actual judges, they're just 3 regular guys. Essentially, you need a beis din of 3 for chalitza. So chalza b'minal chalitza sekshera. So we're going to get into the halachas of shoes, different types of shoes. If you did chalitza, I will say, remember again, just for our purposes, the process of chalitza, bigadol, we'll talk about it, but in a general sense, is the Yevama. The woman goes over to the brother-in-law, removes her right shoe and spits. We're going to discuss where exactly she is spitting. Right, but Lamaisa she spits. That's the process of chalitza. All of this happens, and there are psukim that are said as well. All of this happens in the presence of a beis din. So the Mishnah is now saying, so fact number 1, I need a beis din, 3 people. But interestingly enough, they don't have to be great Talmidei Chacham Rabbanim. They could be a yotos, regular people. Next, you could use a minal. Rabbi say a minal is a shoe. Rashi says shel or rach, a soft leather shoe. Like ours, Rashi says. Ba'an pila, chalitza sapsula. We'll say pila is a sock. If you use a sock, chalitza doesn't work. Right? B'sandal sheyesh lo ekev. If you use a sandal that has a heel, kosher, ultimately it works. V'she'en lo ekev. But if you use a sandal that doesn't have a heel, ultimately again it's puzzle. I will say minahar kuva ulamata chalitza kshera. Very interesting case. Let's say the brother-in-law, the Yavam, is an amputee. So what he has like a prosthetic, right? And it's a below-the-knee prosthetic. So the halakha is in that kind of case, so now you're taking off the shoe from the prosthetic, or the prosthetic itself, we'll discuss. Ultimately, again, kshera, that works. Minahar kuva ulamala chalisa psula. But I will say, ultimately, again, if he's an amputee above the knee, so the prosthetic essentially is attached to the thigh, then halacha l'maisa the chalitza is psula. Then I both say we're going to see ultimately again what that means puzzle, right? We're going to see what that essentially means is that if he's an above the knee amputee, essentially there's no chalitza. Okay, if you look at Rashi right across, Rashi says psula the midi demagin ba'inan dechsev na'alo v'na'a midi demagin. Because also we're going to see that essentially the shoe that is used has to be something that protects the foot. So if he is an above the knee amputee, there's no semblance of a foot, and therefore there's no semblance of a shoe. Again, we'll get into all the technicalities over here. Weiter, chalza b'sandal she'ein shelo. And we'll say, let's say like this. Let's say you use for chalitza a sandal that's not yours. The Yavam's a smart guy. He knows that there's going to be saliva in his shoe. So he says to his buddy, hey, can I borrow your shoes today? Right? Can I borrow your shoes today? So I'll say, well, why? He just conveniently doesn't tell him why. Right? So I'll say, so what happens? Actually, I'm saying it jokingly because we'll see actually where the saliva, where the spit goes. But what happens? The Yavam happens not to be wearing his shoes that day. He borrowed shoes. So chalza b'sandal shein shelo. You do chalitza in shoes that are not yours. O b'sandal shel eitz, or a wooden sandal. O b'shel small b'yamin, or the Yavam is wearing his left shoe on his right foot. Chalitza kshera. In all of these cases, the chalitza is good. Again, we'll see why this is. Chalza begado sheyachal halikbo. Rabbi say, let's say the Yavam is wearing a sandal that's too big for him, or but he's able to walk in it. O bekatan shuchopa es raglo, rov raglo, or he's wearing a very small shoe. But the small shoe nevertheless covers the majority of his foot. in both of these cases, chalitza sekshera. The chalitza works. Chalitza works. The Shabbos is telling you that even if you're wearing an imperfect shoe, halacha l'maisa the chalitza works. Again, we'll get into the technicalities of all of these details. Says the Rabbi, let's analyze the first part. So remember, the first thing the Mishnah told me is that chalitza has to be done in the presence of a beis din, but the beis din could be 3 hedyotos, 3 regular people. Says the Gemara, so we'll say it's contradictory, because after you tell me that that it could even be 3 hedyotos, then why does the Mishnah say dayanin? See, I both say, what's a dayan? Right? Dayan is a skilled professional. So if you don't need dayanin, you just need hedyotos. So why do you say dayanin? Very interesting. Rabbi says we're going to see the chalitza process requires that the beis din feed certain lines to the yavam. So even though you don't need dayanim per se, and you could use hedyotos, the hedyotos must be skilled hedyotos. In other words, they must be capable of feeding the right lines to the yavam. So the Gemara says, Rashi says over here, lahakros liyavam lo chafatzti lekachta. So we'll say there are speaking parts, right? There are speaking parts for both the yavam and the yevama, for both the man and woman. See, even though I don't need, as they say, grosa talmidei chachamim, right? I don't need great talmidei chachamim for this. I don't need dayanim, but they have to be skilled enough to know the psukim and to feed the psukim to the pertinent parties. Tanin l'hadatan rabbanon mitzvahs chalitza b'shlosh shodin lahakros kin dayanim. So here the Brisa says a little bit more explicitly, the mitzvah of chalitza has to be done in the presence of 3 dayanim who know how to feed the right lines to the parties. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda says, no, not 3, 5. You need 5 dayanim for chalitza. So my time with the Tanakama, so we'll say, why does the Tanakama say 3? The Sanya zikenim shnayim, because we'll say the pasuk says that they come to the zikenim. So we'll say zikenim. So minimum of zikenim is what? 2. They ain't beis din shakel, but you can't have a 2-person beis din. We never have an even numbered beis din. Therefore, what? Mosif alein od echad harikan shlosha. So we'll say that's the drasha. Zikenim means 2. Can't have a beis din of 2. Therefore, again, we add on 1. From here, we see that the beis din for chalitza is 3 people. But Rabbi Yehuda says ziknei shnayim, zikenim shnayim. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the Torah uses the word zikenim and ziknei 2 times. So the word zikenim is 2, ziknei is 2, that gives me 4. Ve'ein beis din shakel mosif alein od echad harikan hey. So Rabbi Yehuda says ziknei 2, zikenim 2, that gives me 4. Can't have an even numbered beis din, and therefore what? Add on 1 more, that's 5. So says the Gemara, I v'tanakama, hi ziknei my avidle. So we'll say, Tanakama, you darshan zikenim. What do you do with the word ziknei? So we'll say this fascinating. So we'll say, interesting enough, the Tanakama says, ziknei teaches me, it could even be your elders. Namely, you don't need talmidei chachamim. You could even use hedyotos, even regular people. I Rabbi Yehuda hedyotos minale. Where does Rabbi Yehuda learn out that you could even use regular people? Don't need dayanim. To which the Gemara says nafkale mile'ene. So I will say the pasuk says mile'ene in front of their eyes. Their eyes refers to even common people. The Amar Mar, listen to this, I will say, the Amar Mar, Le'ene prat l'sumin, Le'ene teaches me that you can't have blind members of the beis din for chalitza. Umidi itzri, we're going to see why, because the members of the beis din for chalitza have to see the Yevamos spit. They have to see the spit. They have to actually see the saliva. Therefore, they can't be sumin. And I will say, now watch this. Shmamina dafila yotos. Watch this, I will say. The fact that the members of the beis din can't be blind, by definition tells us that even common men, even common people, could be members of the beis din. Why? Listen to this. Because if you thought that you needed people who were fit to sit on a Sanhedrin, i.e. like real bona fide dayanim, I wouldn't need a pasuk to teach me that the members of the beis din can't be blind. Why? I will say, listen to this. Miditani Rav Yosef, Nafka, Ditani Rav Yosef, Kashem shebeis din minukim b'tzedek, kach beis din minukim mikol mum. Rabbi will say this is fascinating. The same way that the members of the Sanhedrin have to be pious and righteous individuals, they have to be spiritually complete, they also have to be physically complete. They must be totally and wholly unblemished. Shnei Amar Amud Beis, Shnei Amar Kulach Yafe Ra'ayasi Umum Ein Bach. I will say it's quite beautiful. The pasuk in Shir Hashirim says, "You are totally beautiful, my beloved one, and there is no mum, there is no blemish in you." So I will say this is actually quite fascinating. The idea over here is, members of the Sanhedrin cannot possess any physical mum, no physical blemish. I will say, by the way, you see this concept, right? Kohanim can't possess any physical blemish for serving in the Mikdash. Members of the Sanhedrin can't possess any physical blemish. The Melech, the king, can't possess any physical blemish. So the Sefer HaChinuch brings down what's going on over here. I'll say it's a very simple thing. We want people to respect those in authority positions. And I will say the way people are is we look at those with physical blemishes or physical signs of disability in a different way. Let's say it's fascinating. Right? Just human nature is human nature. There's just a different level, right? Also, didn't they say about whatever. So you have to look at people in leadership positions. We're going to speak about FDR, right? There people in leadership positions have to be respected. So people with disabilities or external blemishes are looked at differently by people, just the nature of the world. So therefore, again, I will say, here's what's interesting. That halacha l'maisa, the fact that we need a drasha to say that the members of the Beis Din for Chalitza ultimately have to have vision, can't be blind, indicates to us that halacha l'maisa what? They could be hedyotos. Because if they're members of the Sanhedrin, we know, or regular dayanin, we know that regular dayanin can't have any physical blemishes. So what does the other opinion do with the Eine? So the Gemara says, So I will say, they use La'ene to teach me that the members of the Beis Din must be able to see the saliva come from the mouth of the Yevama. Because the pasuk says, the Eine the Zakenim and she shall spit the Idach. But the other opinion also needs it for the drasha of Rava, that you have to be able to see the saliva come out of her mouth. So where does he learn our hadyotos from? Nafka maybe Yisrael. Yisrael called who? We learn from the word Yisrael that any Yisrael is fit to go ahead and serve on a Beis Din for chalitza. V'idach. What does the other opinion do with the Yisrael? Be Yisrael, be Beis Din shal Yisrael, v'lo be Beis Din shal Gerim. The other opinion uses Yisrael to teach me what? That I will say for Chalitza, you have to use a Beis Din made up of Jews, right? Naturally born Jews, and not a Beis Din of Gerim. V'idach, be Yisrael achrina ksiv. There's another Yisrael that teaches me that. V'idach, we're just going back and forth. I need it for another reason. We're going to come back to that Beis Din of Gerim in just a moment. Pam achas hayni yoshvim lifnei Rabbi Tarfon. Listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda says, one time we were sitting before Rabbi Tarfon. V'amar lanu anu kulchem chalutz hanal. We were on the Beis Din for Yibum or for Chalitza, and they did Chalitza. And Rabbi Tarfon said, everyone has to say out loud, Beis Chalutz Hanal. So I will say, ultimately, again, that we learn out from Yisrael, V'idach, mi v'nikra nafka. So how do I know that I have to say this out loud? We learn that out from the pasuk of v'nikra, ela me'ata, v'karu shnayim, v'dibru shnayim, ha'chanami Rabbi Yehuda harikan tisha, v'rabanan harikan shiva. So I will say, let's take a step back for just a moment. Remember, how do we start this? Machlokas Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon hold that you ultimately need a Beis Din of three. Right? The pasuk says Zakenim, that's two. Zakenim, that's two. Can't have a Beis Din that's of equal number. Therefore, you add on one, that's three. Rabbi Yehuda said, it says Zakenim and Ziknei, that's four. Can't have an even number, add on five. Says here's the problem. The pasuk also says Vikaru and Vidibru. Vikaru is also two. Dibru is also two. So we'll say that's another four. If that's the case, it should be, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you should need 9. Ziknei 2, Zikenim 2, Karu 2, Karu 2, Dibru 2, that gives you what? 8. Can't have an even numbered Beis Din, 9. And according to the Rabbanon, ultimately again it should give me 7. And therefore again, excuse me, 6. And then one more is 7. I need that for Karu v'Dibru for something else. The Karu lo v'lo shlucham. I will say what it tells me is that when we summon the Yavam to Beis Din themselves have to summon the Yavam, and they can't send an agent. They can't send an emissary. They can't send an agent. So the Gemara says, "V'dibru elav, melamed shemasin lo eitzal genes." I will say, so that's Karu. Karu teaches me that Beis Din themselves must summon the Yavam, not their shaliach. What is Dibru? I will say this is incredible. Dibru teaches me that Beis Din engages in a conversation with the Yavam. What's the conversation? Shemasin lo eitzal genes lo. We give the Yavam advice. Right? We give the Yavam advice. Namely, should he do Yibum or Chalitza? Shem hayo hu yeled v'hi zekena. For example, I will say if the Yavam was very young and the Yevama was older, or hu zaken v'hi yelda, or ultimately again he was old and she was very young. Omrim lo malacha eitzel yelda, malacha eitzel zakena. We say to the Yavam, come on Yavam, you're an old man, she's a young woman, you're going to have nothing in common, it's not a good idea. Or, you're very young, she's very old, come on, this is not a good idea. Kelecha eitzel shekamoscha, v'atachnis kitata l'soch beisecha. Go marry someone who's a bit more fitting for you, and don't go ahead and bring animosity into your home. I will say it would appear that Chazal did not believe in the concept of opposites attract, right? And therefore, again, Chazal felt that if we see that there's too much of a gap between this man, and I will say they're using age as an example, but it's not just age. It's not just age. If the Beis Din sees that this shidduch is just not going to work, so I will say it's very interesting. So you might have thought that any case where the Yavam and the Yevama are willing to do Yibum, that Beis Din just says, sure, go for it. You see from here that's not the case. That when Beis Din sees that this shidduch is not Ola Yafa, that this is just not going to be a good idea, that Beis Din actually intervenes. Now, obviously, you can't stop this man or woman from doing Yibum or Chalitza. Whatever they're going to do. But Lamaisa, Beis Din does take a look at the quality of the shidduch, and Beis Din will say, it's really not a good idea, and therefore will give them eight sahogenas. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Halacha Chalitza b'shlosha. So we'll say, so now let's go back. How did this all start? So we'll say, so remember again, we have a Mishnah that says, Chalitza is done in front of a Beis Din of 3, and we've established is, do you need like a bona fide Beis Din of real Dayanim? No. What do you need? Even Hadyotos, even regular people. But what you need are people who are capable of feeding the correct lines to the respective parties. So we'll say, now we saw Machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda said, no, the Beis Din for Chalitza is 5. So how do we paskin? Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Halacha Chalitza b'shlosha. The halacha is that Chalitza is done with 3 people. Beis Din of 3. Hoyel ustam lan tanakavase. Why? Because we have a stam Mishnah. I will say our Mishnah recorded no machlokes. Our Mishnah just said that all you need is 3. So a stam Mishnah is considered to be authoritative, and therefore again we go 3. Amar le Rav Nachman. Ihachi miyun nami. So what about miyun? So we started today's daf with this. Miyun is a prize. Remember again, you have a father died, mother or brother marry off the minor girl. Now what happens? I will say, because this is a rabbinic marriage, she has the right to what? Dissolve it with mere miyun, objection, right? Refusal. Thank you, refusal, right? So she has the ability to say, I don't want this marriage anymore. And if she refuses it, it dissolves the marriage. And I will say, miyun also needs a Beis Din. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, that you're going to tell me that by Chalitz you only need a Beis Din of 3, because there's a Stam Mishnah, so miyun should also only require a Beis Din of 3. This nan, but I'll say first white line, Kaf Aleph Amud Beis, this nan, ha miyun v'chalitza b'shlosha, miyun and chalitza b'shlosha, and I'll say there's another Stam Mishnah, v'chi tema hachinami. So say, yeah, miyun only requires a Beis Din of 3. I b'vat, Tanya, we learned, miyun, be'shamei omrim Beis Din mumchin. Beis Shammai says, ultimately again, that miyun requires Beis Din mumchin, right? A Beis Din of experts. Beis Hillel omrim bebeis din v'shelo bebeis din. Beis Hillel says no, miyun could be done in beis din, outside of beis din. Elu v'elu modim shetzarech shlosha, and both agree that you need three. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon machshirin b'shnayim. They say no, for miyun you could even go ahead and use two. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yomi, Rabbi Nachman, halacha kosazug. The halacha follows this pair. In other words, namely Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, who say that you only need two. You only need two. So I will say, so we see now we have an opinion that says miyun only needs two. So the Gemara says, hasam chad stam. So I will say, point over here is that you see that just because you have a stam mishnah doesn't automatically always mean the halacha follows that way. Because what's the ayah to that? The proof to that is by miyun, right? By miyun, you also have a stam mishnah, right? That says miyun is three, but then you have another opinion that says miyun only requires two. And yet we told the halacha follows the opinion that says two. So what's going on over here? So we'll say, so why do we automatically assume, therefore, that the halacha is going to follow the stam mishnah by chalitza and require three? Here's the difference. Hasam chat stama b'hacha trei stami. We'll say by miyun you only have one stam mishnah. By chalitza you have two stam mishnayos. Two stam mishnayos. Two stam mishnahs. Two stam mishnayos. That's strong. That's strong. To which the Gemara says, "V'hacha trei stami, hasam nami trei stami ninu." The truth is, by miyun, you also have two stam mishnahs. This nan miyana o shechaltza befanav yisa'ena mipnei shuba bezdin. Shabbos say here the Mishnah also seems to indicate that miyun is happening in front of a bezdin, and the minimum of bezdin is always what? Is always going to be three. Ela hasam trei stami hachat tlasa stami. Okay, we'll say now they're just getting into a numbers contest, right? By chalitza, we have three stam mishnahs. Three stam mishnahs. By miyun, you only have two stam mishnahs. Okay? To which the Gemara says, I don't understand. El hazam sheistami ha'as stami. Michti, hastama v'hastama, mali schat stam, mali trei stam, mali tlasa. See, I will say, I don't understand. The whole chap of a stam mishnah is that when you have a mishnah without attribution, what do we assume? Everyone holds that way. If that's the case, what does it matter if you have one stam, two stam, three stams? What does it matter? So Rabbi say, here's the difference. The concept of a stam b'makom machlokes. Rabbi say, what do you do with the stam mishnah when I also know that there's a machlokes? This nan, here we go. Smichas zekenim ve'egla arufa Bishlosha. Because Rabbi say halacha l'maisa, here's what we have. Rabbi say smichas zekenim in this case is talking about a par ha'elam davar minat tzibor. Right? So Rabbi say par ha'elam davar minat tzibor is talking about again a communal offering that's brought when there was a communal mistake. So Rabbi say, so the smichas zekenim, egla arufa is the decapitated calf that's brought when you find a dead body in between two cities. The zekenim of the closest city come along and bring the egla rufa b'shlosha. Requires a basin of three. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'chamisha. You require five. Hachalitza v'amiyun b'shlosha. Chalitza and miyun require three. Below kapalig Rabbi Yehuda, and ultimately again Rabbi Yehuda doesn't argue. Shmamina hadr be Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi say, what do you see now? Rabbi say now Rabbi Yehuda was on record as saying before that what? That ultimately again miyun requires two. Here you see he says three. Shmamina had Rabbi Yehuda shmamina. See from here, Rabbi Yehuda retracted his position. Therefore, Rabbi say what comes out is halacha l'maisa. For our purposes, miyun requires a beis din of three. That is our halacha l'maisa. Require a beis din of three. Ultimately, again, but they could be hedyotos. Right? But l'maisa now miyun we had a machlokes. But Rabbi say by miyun now it appears that you also require a beis din of three as well. All right, so we'll stop over here for today. Shkoyach, Mazel Tov on the Siyum, Mazel Tov on the new parak. Incredible venture continues tomorrow. Shkoyach.